In 1963, in a small city in central Turkey called Derinkuyu, a man was renovating the basement of his house. His pickaxe hit a wall that should not have been there. The wall gave way, and when the dust settled, he found himself looking into a stone staircase descending into darkness. He descended afraid with a hand lamp. He found a chamber, then a corridor, then another chamber, then a staircase descending further still. It was not his basement. It was an entire city, 18 floors deep, 85 meters below the floor of his own house, with capacity to shelter 20,000 people. And it had been there, beneath that house, beneath that entire city, forgotten, silent, intact, for centuries. This is the story of Turkey's underground cities, and of the question that nobody can answer properly. Why did so many ancient peoples, across so many different traditions, see the earth as the place to preserve life when something was coming? To understand the magnitude of what was discovered that afternoon in 1963, you need to understand the place. Derinkuyu is a small city in the province of Nevşehir in central Turkey, in the heart of a region called Cappadocia. Today it is a tourist destination, but until recently it was just an ordinary town. White houses, small markets, people who lived from agriculture. Nobody there had any suspicion of what lay beneath their own feet. When word spread and archaeologists arrived with proper equipment, with maps, with the right methodology, they began to understand what they had on their hands. It was not an old cellar, it was a project. The archaeologists catalogued 18 known floors, 85 meters of depth, chambers with clear functions, each one designated for a specific purpose. Living quarters for thousands of families, stables for animals. On the second floor, near the surface, so that the gas from the animals would rise and be expelled through chimneys without entering the city below. Kitchens, dining halls, wine cellars, grain stores, schools with benches carved into the stone, churches, because early Christians used the city extensively. There are Orthodox crosses carved into the walls, partially preserved Byzantine paintings, cemeteries, water wells descending to the water table with buckets that would still work today. And the most impressive system of all, the ventilation system. Inside Derinkuyu, there are more than 50 ventilation shafts descending from ground level to the bottom of the city. Some are more than 55 meters deep. They function as inverted chimneys, drawing fresh air in through the physical principle of temperature differences between surface and depth. And they were designed with such care that even today, after centuries of abandonment, the air inside the underground city remains breathable. No mold, no suffocation. Anyone who descends now in the height of a Turkish summer will find a cool, ventilated, surprisingly welcoming place. And there were, at various points throughout the city, doors, stone doors, enormous, round, carved like millstones, some weighing several tons each. They were fitted into lateral grooves in the corridors. When a threat came, they were pushed out of those grooves, blocking the corridor like a gigantic stone plug. From the outside, impossible to open. From the inside, a hole the size of a head in the center of the stone allowed defenders to push spears against anyone who tried to pass. This was not an improvised hiding place. It was a fortress, thought out, planned and executed with an engineering that continues to impress modern engineers. And the most disturbing thing is that Derinkuyu was not alone. To understand why so many underground cities were built in exactly that place, you need to understand the geology. Cappadocia, about 10 million years ago, was an active volcanic region. Enormous volcanoes erupted for long periods, covering the entire region with a thick layer of ash. When that ash cooled and compacted over millennia, it formed a very particular type of rock called volcanic tuff. It is a light, porous rock with a unique quality for construction. It is soft when wet and hardens over time, especially when it dries in contact with air. In other words, you can carve tuff with simple tools, but once it hardens, it becomes firm enough to support large chambers. And the erosion of wind over millennia created the landscape that today attracts tourists from around the world. Vertical stone pillars, some with basalt caps on top, looking like giant mushrooms. The Turks call them fairy chimneys. Seen from above, Cappadocia looks more like the surface of another planet than like Turkey. But the true magic of that type of stone is not above ground, it is below. The ancestral inhabitants of that region discovered that they could excavate tough with basic tools and open enormous tunnels. More than that, the tunnels remained stable. The stone itself, after being carved and exposed to air, became even firmer, and they began to dig. First, small chambers for storing grain, food, wine. Then, entire houses inside the stone. Then villages, then cities. More than 200 known underground cities have been found in the last 50 years in that same region. Some small with few chambers, others enormous like Derinkuyu, with capacity for 20,000 people. And there is archaeological evidence of tunnels connecting these cities. Derinkuyu may have been linked to the underground city of Kaimakli, approximately 9 kilometers away, by a tunnel that archaeologists are still mapping. An underground network, hundreds of square kilometers of cities, tunnels, chambers, all connected. Total capacity to shelter hundreds of thousands of people beneath the ground. And then comes the question that archaeology still debates. Who built all of this? And more importantly, why? To answer the question of who built the underground cities, I want you to imagine a specific scene. It is the summer of 674 AD. In a village in Cappadocia, a man named Theodore is working in the fields when he sees dust on the horizon. Not dust from wind, dust from horses, many horses. He knows that sign. The entire village knows it. It means the Arab army has returned, and this time it looks larger than before. Theodore runs home, calls his wife, the children, the neighbors. In less than an hour, the entire village is in motion, not outward but downward. The entrance is in a cellar behind a storehouse. Only the elders know exactly where it is. They descend. The animals first, sheep and goats on the second floor, near the surface, as always. Then the children, then the adults. The stone doors, weighing tons, are pushed into their tracks, one corridor at a time, closing off the world above. At the bottom, Theodore and his family remain in the darkness, lit only by candles. They hear, distant and muffled, the sounds from the surface. They stay below for 2 months. When they finally ascend, the village is burned. The granaries, empty. The fields destroyed, but they are alive, and they begin to rebuild. This scene, and variations of it, repeated itself in Cappadocia for centuries, because the most solid explanation for the underground cities is also the most human: survival. The first excavations were probably made by the Phrygians, a people who dominated central Anatolia between roughly the 8th and 6th centuries BC. The Phrygians worked stone on a monumental scale. They carved enormous tombs and temples into cliff faces and had the tools and skill to begin the great excavations. Before them, around 3,500 years ago, the Hittites had dominated the region. And there are references in Hittite texts to underground structures, though it is hard to know whether they were of the type we see in Derinkuyu or smaller refugees. But the phase of greatest expansion was the Christian phase. The first centuries of Christianity were centuries of persecution. Imperial Rome actively persecuted Christians. Cappadocia, with its geology, offered a natural hiding place. And when, centuries later, the Arab invasions came, between the 7th and 10th centuries, the Orthodox Christians of Cappadocia expanded the cities massively. For generations, entire communities like Theodore's descended when attacks came. They stayed below sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, with stored food, animals in the stables, water from the wells, and they came back up when the danger had passed. This is why inside Derinkuyu we find churches with Orthodox crosses carved into the walls, partially preserved Byzantine paintings, inscriptions in Greek. The city served in its most intense phase as refuge for an entire Christian community, and it continued to be used into the 20th century. There are records of Greeks from the region as late as 1923, during the population exchange between Greece and Turkey, descending to the upper levels of the underground cities for protection. This is the historical explanation. And it explains a great deal. But it does not explain everything, because there are details in Derinkuyu that do not fit completely into this narrative. The standard explanation says the underground cities were refuges against invaders. built slowly over centuries by the Phrygians and early Christians, and that explanation covers most of the evidence. But there are details it does not cover so well. First, the scale. 20,000 people in Derinkuyu. For refuge against typical ancient invaders, that is a lot. Small cities near Cappadocia on the surface had populations of perhaps a few thousand at most. Who was going to descend? And who was going to build underground cities with capacity far greater than the surface population they served? Second, the depth. 85 meters down, 18 floors. To hide from invaders who probably would not even discover the entrance, 2 or 3 floors would be sufficient. Why go so deep? The effort to excavate stone to that depth is absurdly greater than what is needed for simple military defense. Third, the ventilation system. The more than 50 ventilation shafts in Derinkuyu, some 55 meters deep, are a disturbing feat of engineering. They were not designed for a siege season. They were designed for continuous use, for a population that might stay below ground for very long periods, perhaps for years. Fourth, the architectural complexity. The underground cities have chambers with specific functions, connected by planned corridors, with a hierarchy of spaces. It does not look improvised, it looks designed before excavation by someone who knew exactly what they wanted to build. And here appears a detail that few tourists notice. At different depths in Derinkuyu, the chisel marks in the stone are different. Older layers have marks from primitive tools. More recent layers have marks from more sophisticated tools. The city was not built from top to bottom all at once. It was built over generations, over centuries, possibly over millennia. And in the oldest layers, the marks are from an era before the Phrygians, possibly the Hittite era, possibly even earlier. Who started all of this? And why was the scale, from the very beginning, so disproportionate to a simple escape from invaders? This is where the story becomes truly interesting. Because in a sacred text from ancient Persia, written in a religion that arose long before Judaism and Christianity as we know them, imagine being Yima. According to the ancient Persian sacred text called the Avesta, the oldest book of Zoroastrianism, Yima was the best of kings, the most just, the wisest, the one who brought abundance and peace to his people. And one day, Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of light and good, came to him and said something no king wants to hear. The world is going to end, not now, but soon. A winter will come, not an ordinary winter, a cosmic winter. Snow will cover the entire earth. The animals will die. The plants will die. The ice will destroy everything humanity has built. And the only way to preserve life was one: go down. Ahura Mazda gave Yima specific instructions to build what the text calls the Vara, an underground refuge. And the instructions are detailed in a way that disturbs modern readers. The Vara was to have 3 concentric rings, a wider outer ring, a middle ring, an inner ring at the center. Each ring designated for a specific function: human habitation, animals, seeds of the best plants. It was to have systems that produced internal light, described in the text as windows that illuminate from within, even without sun. It was to have water, ventilation, chambers to preserve grain, to shelter animals, to sustain a complete population through the endless winter. And it was to have doors, sealed from inside, that no enemy could open from outside. Yima built the Vara. And when the cosmic winter came, the text says life was preserved beneath the earth while the world above died. Now I will make the comparison that some archaeologists make, and I will be honest about what it means and what it does not mean. The Vara has 3 concentric rings with specific functions. In Derinkuyu, archaeologists identify exactly this organization: outer areas for arrival and stables near the surface, intermediate areas for daily life, and deep areas for preservation of critical resources. The Vara has windows that produce internal light. In Derinkuyu, the vertical shafts linking surface and depth allow natural light to penetrate deep chambers at certain hours of the day. The Vara shelters humans, animals, and seeds. Derinkuyu has living chambers, stables, and grain stores. The Vara protects against extreme cold from outside, The temperature in Derinkuyu remains stable throughout the year, between 13 and 15 degrees Celsius, regardless of the heat or cold on the surface. The conceptual coincidence is real, and it is strong. But I need to be honest with you about what this means. When two things seem to fit, it is tempting to say that one explains the other, that the Vara is Derinkuyu, or that Zoroastrian engineers from Persia came to teach the Phrygians, or that there was a lost global civilization that left marks in both places. Let me say clearly what the evidence allows us to conclude and what it does not. First, there is no archaeological proof that Yima's Vara is Derinkuyu or any known underground city. The Persian text is geographically imprecise. It refers to mountains in the east, possibly present-day Iran, Afghanistan, or Central Asia, not Central Anatolia. Derinkuyu is about 1,500 kilometers west of the regions mentioned in the text. Second, there is no evidence of a prehistoric global civilization that mastered underground excavation techniques. Derinkuyu was built by local populations, probably Phrygian, later Christian, using techniques that developed locally over centuries. Third, the conceptual coincidence does not require a common origin. It may simply be that two ancient cultures, at different times and in different places, independently arrived at the same idea. When a people face a hostile climate or hostile enemies, digging into the earth is a universally attractive solution. It requires no special knowledge. It requires only time, manpower, and the simple observation that below ground is warmer in winter, cooler in summer, and invisible to enemies. Underground construction in the ancient world is common. In Petra, the Nabateans carved entire cities into pink cliffstone. In Malula, Syria, early Christian communities excavated underground refuges during persecutions. In northern China, entire populations lived for centuries in houses carved into the soil, and some still do today. Building beneath the earth is a universal human solution. What makes Cappadocia special is the scale, the complexity, and the duration of the effort, not the impossibility. But there is something that connects the Zoroastrian Persian world to the world of Cappadocia, beyond the conceptual coincidence. Something concrete, historical, documented. This is the part that school maps usually forget. Anatolia, the region that today is all of Turkey, was part of the Persian Empire for more than 200 years. Between approximately 540 BC and 330 BC, when Alexander the Great conquered the region, Cappadocia was a Persian satrapy, a province administered by Zoroastrian Persian kings, with Zoroastrian governors, with Zoroastrian priests, the Magi, circulating through the major cities. And here is the important detail. The Phrygians, who according to the archaeological consensus were the main initial builders of the underground cities, lived in exactly this period. The great expansion of the underground excavations, especially the first technically sophisticated phases, happened in the same centuries that Persia governed the region. Archaeologists do not say this proves direct influence. There is no Persian text saying we taught the Phrygians to build underground cities. There is no Phrygian text saying we learned from the Persians, but the temporal and geographic overlap is real and well documented. And there is one more detail. Researchers who studied the earliest layers of Cappadocia's underground cities have noted specific solar symbols carved into some chambers. Solar discs with rays, geometric patterns resembling Zoroastrian representations of Ahura Mazda, the god of sun and light. These symbols are not Christian. They predate the Christian and Byzantine phases of those same cities, and they are consistent with Zoroastrian symbolism from the Persian era. This does not prove that Zoroastrians built Derinkuyu, but it suggests with some degree of probability that Zoroastrians were part of the story, that they lived in the cities, that they practiced their faith there, that they possibly contributed technical knowledge from their own traditions to the construction and expansion of these underground networks. And if you remember Thursday's episode, there is a symbolic detail that ties everything together. The Magi from the east, the Zoroastrian priests who went to visit the child Jesus, traveled through central Anatolia on their way between Persia and Judea. They passed through Cappadocia. possibly through the very regions where today we find the underground cities. The story, carefully stitched together, makes a picture. The Persian text describes an underground refuge. Persia governs Cappadocia for 200 years. Underground cities grow in exactly that period. Zoroastrian symbols appear in the oldest chambers, and the symbolic heirs of that tradition traveled through that same region afterward. It is not a chain of proofs, it is a chain of coincidences that, together, suggest there may be something in the history of the underground cities we do not yet fully understand. Let me tell you something that few tourists who visit Derinkuyu know. The part open to the public represents about 10% of the total known site. The other 90% is closed, either because it has not been completely excavated, or because it was considered structurally unsafe, or because the depth requires equipment that regular tourism cannot provide. And in the deepest places, where archaeological maintenance is most difficult, there are sections that have not even been completely mapped. Archaeologists who worked in Derinkuyu frequently report finding chambers with no clear function, spaces with strange layouts, sections where the chisel marks are different, older, more primitive than in the better-known layers, and the famous tunnel that would connect Derinkuyu to Kaymakli, 9 kilometers away, has still not been completely traversed. Parts of it are blocked, parts flooded, parts unsafe. No complete archaeological excavation, with carbon dating of the deepest organic residues, with detailed stratigraphic analysis, has been done at Derinkuyu or the other underground cities. What we know with certainty is what was documented in the most visible and most used layers. What is in the oldest depths in the least explored chambers is in part still a mystery, and every new excavation in Cappadocia may bring new information. Think about what choosing to live beneath the earth means. Going up is not the option. Building tall towers, fortresses, walls is a choice of visibility, of domination of the terrain, of projection of force. Going down, by contrast, is a choice of invisibility, of waiting, of preservation. Those who go down are saying they accept not dominating the world above in exchange for continuing to exist when that world fails. And here in my reading, the story of Yima and the archaeological story of Cappadocia's cities meet. The Persian text says that Ahura Mazda told Yima to go down because a cosmic winter was coming and the world above was going to fail. The choice of the Vara was preservation, not domination. Yima surrendered control of the climate and of history, and in return preserved what mattered. Theodore and his family in 674 made the same choice on a smaller scale. When the horses appeared on the horizon, they did not try to resist. They descended, preserved, waited, and resurfaced when the danger passed. The psychology is the same. The architecture is the same. The difference is only one of scale. And perhaps that is what connects the ancient text to the archaeologist's stone, not a direct technical transmission, not Zoroastrian engineers traveling to Anatolia to teach the Phrygians, but a universal, ancient, deep human response to the fear of the end. The shared intuition that when the sky fails, the earth protects, and that intuition continues. The Cold War bunkers are direct heirs of it, the air raid shelters of the 2 world wars too. NORAD is built inside a mountain, and the global seed vault in Svalbard, which preserves seeds of the world's best plants buried 130 meters inside a Norwegian mountain, is the modern Vara, literally, seeds of the best plants preserved beneath the earth against the possibility of the end. Humanity has never stopped making this choice. It has only updated the technologies. So where do we end up? We know that beneath the soil of central Anatolia, there are more than 200 underground cities, some capable of sheltering tens of thousands of people with sophisticated engineering, with ventilation systems that still work today. We know these cities were built in layers over more than 2,000 years, probably started by the Phrygians and expanded massively by early Christians and Byzantines. We know there exists in a sacred text from ancient Persia a description of an underground refuge with strikingly similar conceptual features to what we find in Derinkuyu. We know that Zoroastrian Persia governed Cappadocia for 200 years, exactly the period of the first great excavations. And we know that 90% of Derinkuyu has not yet been explored. What we do not know is how much there is still to discover. What we do not know is whether there was direct technical transmission between the Persian tradition and the builders of Cappadocia. And what we do not know, perhaps the most disturbing of all, is what is in the oldest chambers, in the deepest unexplored depths, waiting for archaeologists with enough time and funding to get there. And perhaps that is why, when you descend the staircase of Derinkuyu today and feel the cool air and see the empty chambers with centuries of silent history, something in you recognizes the place, not as a tourist, as an heir. Because the choice to go down when the world above fails, that choice is as old as humanity itself. And we have not finished making it. Subscribe, because the story does not end here.